from Mario Bros.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devon Decker, and joining me, my host companion, Sejohn Sarowick. Sejohn?
Hey everybody, let me put a stop to my morning routine.
Super Mario, what does that mean that you're listening to Super Mario Bros?
I've got the Mario Brothers 3 full soundtrack up, just playing in the background and while we were talking.
Oh, can I ruin that for you right now?
Okay.
There is a video on YouTube. It's the athletic theme. So I don't know if you know the athletic theme. Well, you do. You have the soundtrack there. But for anyone who isn't, it's the... That one. That's the athletic theme.
Yeah, okay.
So it was ruined for me, and now I'm ruining it for everybody who listens to the podcast. And it is... There's a video out there on YouTube. It's not something that I came up with. I will give full credit to it. And they gave that song lyrics.
Nice.
And the lyrics to that song, he says nice. This is the best part. This is the before. And here's what those lyrics is. Running and I'm jumping and I'm furiously masturbating.
Excellent.
And then, and then I come on the floor and then I'm coming some more. And then I come on the door and then I come. Now
Not
I'm done.
safe for families. Just putting that out there.
This show has a big E on it. It's a big red E. It's not like the Big E in Western Massachusetts. Wait, we can't say cum? Cum's a bad word?
We're not. I mean, like...
I'm pretty sure I called Julia Roberts a cunt once on this show.
Well, there it is, folks. Yep, we are officially starting off from the bottom, so the only way is up.
Started from the bottom, now we go and try to hit the top. We're probably not going to. I don't know how to feel about this. We had such energy last episode, and I loved it. That Friday energy... It was different. It was a special type of feeling. And now I feel like I have 2 whole weeks I need to fit into this episode. And the best place to start with that is with the thing that we couldn't talk about last week because Disney Plus was a dick. And I've rectified that problem. I'm not happy. I'm not 100% happy with how I rectified that problem. But we'll explore that after we discuss She-Hulk. Brief. It's only been 2 episodes, and usually you want to give it a 4-episode test. But in a 9-episode series...
God damn it, Marvel. Like, land on a number, please. It's getting harder and harder for me to keep track of what's going on. And
9 is the number, though. That makes sense.
Well, so 9 is the number for She-Hulk, but there was 6 episodes of this, 8 episodes of that.
Well,
9...
no, for the half-hour shows, which She-Hulk is... 9 is the number. It's WandaVision. WandaVision was 9 too. Mm-hmm. So if it's an hour long, if the average is like an hour long show, it's 6. If the average is it's a half hour long show, it goes back to the 9. That's what I mean. What If was 9 episodes. What If might have been 10 episodes.
Yeah. They're not consistent because also Falcon and Winter Soldier was 6, right? And
Hawkeye was 6.
Hawkeye was 6, yep.
And Moon Knight was 6.
Yep, but then if you go to all of their Netflix shows...
Their Netflix shows don't count. I'm not considering them in that. Because that's based on the Netflix model of doing shows. I mean, that's me. I don't know.
No, yes, that's where it comes from, but it doesn't help if you're sitting somebody down to watch these shows and they want to know how much of a commitment they're making. And 3 of them are 10 episodes, 1 or 2 of them are 6 episodes, a few of them are 9 episodes. So there's no consistency across the board of which to bring people in.
I do feel like Disney Plus has tried to have consistency. I don't know. That's me. That's where I'm coming from. Anyway,
maybe in the time, but then you have to point to content. The other issue with the consistency is that telling somebody that they're sitting down for a Marvel TV show nowadays also means nothing.
Or it could be the Stranger Things season 4 finale, which was I think 3 hours long,
right?
Give or take. Like, it's weird. Content creation in the streaming world. We're not talking about that. We're going to try to avoid talking about streaming business this week because I feel like we've just overdosed on it lately. And like coconut milk, it'll just put you right to sleep.
I was going over old episodes of ours with somebody the other day as they were kind of going through the back catalog trying to get caught up on some stuff, and they found an episode from like 2019 where in the description we talk about the changing streaming landscape and about how in the years to come things are going to get buck wild apparently. And so yeah, we called that in like December of 2019, I think was the episode.
December 2019. If I had to point a magnifying glass at our show, that's where I would try to aim it. Because also we talk about how bad 2019 was and how excited we are for 2020. And like, someone came in like, yeah, you guys missed that shot. You like, you guys sometimes call them, but like, you fucked us all.
Well, it's
with
not
your
a matter.
hope for 2020.
First of all, I'd like to think we all had hope for 2020 that got shattered. We as a people were really kicked in the nuts with 2020, right?
Yeah,
It
that's
wasn't
true.
just you and me that just were like, it's gonna be a good one, guys. We promise. And everybody else was like, I don't know. Like, no, everybody was pretty convinced that we were staring down the barrel of the times a changing, and they were just not for the better.
I mean, the really great thing about what's happened with the 2020 so far, meaning the whole 10-year, is it proves for Sejohn his whole a time period, a decade is not really over until a few years into it.
Yeah, I mean, culturally, like we've talked about this before, but yeah, we are finally getting to that point where we're able to kind of get over what happened last decade and start creating new shit for the next one.
Yeah, it's a weird, wacky, wild time. But She-Hulk. So you said you had some questions about She-Hulk that you were hoping to talk to me about. So I don't know. Do you want to address them here or like?
I don't really remember too many
Oh,
big
okay, cool.
questions, big capital Q questions. It was just more like as somebody that is completely aware of She-Hulk and has seen the character, pop up from time to time in the comics, but never really like dedicated myself to like huge arcs of their own story. So like I know like some of the beats that happen with She-Hulk, but first of all the beats are usually based on like major events, right? Like Civil War and things like that. So that it's not really going to be something that comes up in the show. But on top of that, like they wouldn't focus on the ones that involved 10 other people, right? So I just as a casual observer, casual fan, just have no context for like where they could be going with some of the stuff in that series. And like so some of the stuff that you and I have talked about off mic that we should just like address right here, like is for instance is the cruiser showing up, the spaceship that shows up at the beginning that sets off the entire like series.
Yeah,
Is that going to be something that is addressed by She-Hulk, or is that something that's going to get addressed by
Have you
like
not watched the second
Secret Wars?
episode yet?
No, I have not watched the second
Oh,
episode.
okay. Then we need to stop because that's already been addressed.
Yeah, but those are the kinds of questions that I had after the pilot, right? Is like, where are they going with this? Like, what is this going to be? And I'm glad that they addressed it in the second episode because I think they kind of had to, because the first episode is just so good at setting up what the world is, but does nothing to tell you what the next step is, like where they're going. So I'm glad that they get to it like right away, because there's
I'm mad at you just a little bit because you gave me a rash of shit for not watching She-Hulk last week, and then you didn't watch episode 2. Like,
no, I'm gonna wait until there's like a whole bunch of episodes to watch. I don't know why this surprises you every time there's a streaming show where I talk about how I'd rather watch like a bunch of them in bulk.
when I
than week to
understand that
week.
that's how you want to
So
do it,
that's
I'm fine with that's how you want to do it. But when you're just like, you didn't watch She-Hulk, I thought that we could talk about it, and I'm just like, oh yeah, I'll watch it as soon as I can. I got fucked over by Disney Plus and Amazon Fire Stick having a fight for some reason. No, I mean, the first episode was great because it's all exposition, but that where do they go from here? That's all what episode 2 is.
Yeah.
So
and that was really just my biggest. If you wanted to say I had a question after the first episode, that was really the only big major one. And as you pointed out, they address it pretty quick. I mean, like, it's a tight show. I think that's what I'm getting at, right? Is like even having only seen the first episode, like it knows exactly what it wants to do. It doesn't have that floundering nature of, say, like Captain and Winter Soldier, like it's like Captain America and oh, man, I keep wanting to call him Captain Falcon. That's why I keep stumbling on that. but Falcon and Winter Soldier, right? Like one could be forgiven for the first couple of episodes of that show to say like, what the hell, like where are they going? Like what is happening here? And as we already discussed, on a shorter episode count, that gets kind of scary, right? You start to feel as a fan like maybe they're just throwing shit in and hoping to see what sticks, which doesn't ever feel good. But this does not feel that way, right? Like it feels like they very much know exactly where they want to go with She-Hulk, and that feels good.
I mean, you say that, but that's how I felt about WandaVision. And then after the 4th episode, which was wonderful, I felt like the back half of that show kind of fell apart. And that's me. That's my personal... Even watching it again a second time to prepare for Multiverse of Madness, like, that felt very established as what the show was going to be. And then as it kept going, it felt like a little draggy, or God forbid you have like a filler episode when you know what your episode count is. I do hope that She-Hulk is able to fix the problem that happened there. And it might just be a Devon problem. I will admit that like freely.
Wait, so this is why this is so unclear to me that I'm going to need you to back up a second. Are you saying that you wish there had been more filler episodes, or that there were too many filler episodes? I don't even because me thinking on it, I don't think there's an episode that's filler, and I like it that way. So I'm just curious what you're saying
I feel like
on
there are.
WandaVision, to be clear.
I understood. WandaVision, watching it the second time, watching it the first time, it was new, it was exciting. Plus, we were all locked in our houses, so it was something to look forward to. And I did it. But then watching it again, there are like later episodes, not so much that they're filler episodes. Every episode does sort of do something to move the needle, but there are chunks of episodes that feel inconsequential or like they're misdirects or red herrings, and then they sort of end up feeling like filler episodes. Kind of the 90s episode of WandaVision feels a little bit like, well, we've done the 60s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. Let's do the 90s episode.
But isn't the 90s episode the one that brings in her brother and all of that, right?
Yeah,
Which is
but that episode, I mean, that doesn't really end up going anywhere. Like, it's like a really good idea. It's really, it's fan servicey, but like the big thing that moves the needle there is Vision realizing that like deeper out away from Wanda, things are not going well in the town of Westview.
Yeah,
that's like a fun episode. It feels like a fillery holiday episode to me. I'll be honest about it. It's me. I know it's me.
I think that it really establishes a lot about what Wanda sees in herself, right? Like that, like the realization that I mean, spoilers for WandaVision, I guess, really quick, but like the realization that it's not her brother, but rather just her manifesting a version of him to like basically give herself permission to do the things that she's doing, and then she like realizes that about herself by the end of that arc. Like there's a lot of self-exploration and like character work going on in those episodes that like I am totally fine with in terms of larger action, moving the story outside of the bubble. Like I think that's one of my biggest things about the concept of filler episodes. Filler episodes are definitely a thing that exists. I'm not going to sit here and say like every episode of television matters, right? There is definitely some bullshit episodes of shows. Sometimes ones that straight up like contradict other things in other episodes and main continuity and things like that.
Looking
right?
at you, Olympic Superstore. It's been up in my memories a lot lately.
Yes, right. So that does exist, right? But I think too often people take the term filler episode, and I'm semi-accusing you of doing this, but don't take it too personally. That's all I'm saying. They take the phrase filler episode and the overarching concept of just like surface level. This doesn't move things forward for me or in a way that I consider progress, and they think that automatically makes the episode not worth the time or anything like that. But people tend to forget that like there's episodes of television shows that are purposefully paced in those ways for artistic reasons, like for instance character development or red herrings and throwing stuff off. That's such a hard card to play, right? Like because on the one hand, on mystery shows, and WandaVision is a mystery show because you're trying to figure out what's going on, right? Like on those kinds of like mystery shows where you're trying to figure out what's happening, misdirects and misreads and things not being what they seem, like that is baked into that concept, right? And if it's not well done, then it can feel like it was a waste of your time or even feel like you were just lied to, right? And so if you want to talk about whether or not the structure of that show and whether or not it's good enough to pull off some of that shit, I agree that there's definitely something to be said about how they don't always earn all of that stuff for sure. But I'm not offended that they try it or they do it, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like I said, at the time I enjoyed it. It's upon reflection that I'm like, man, like this was the first one, and obviously there's going to be some bumps and bruises out of the gate, but it didn't exactly represent well. If you were somebody who never watched any bit of Marvel entertainment, WandaVision left you with more questions than answers, just about what this is going to be.
I mean, the same could be said about something like Loki as well, right?
Yeah.
And like you're not wrong. And let's be honest, the bigger thing that really fucks WandaVision in the end is definitely Multiverse of Madness and the way in which that movie like will straight up reference things that happen in that show and then also just move on as if they didn't happen. So like that
But
show
it's
is
the
really in a
dark
weird.
hold, Sejohn.
There's a lot of really weird like ways in which you kind of have to kind of not embrace that. I mean, the real beauty of all of this conversation is like this is the same shit people have been saying about comics for 30,
Yeah,
40
that's
years,
true.
right?
Yeah.
Like the ways in which certain artists will come in and write an arc for a character and then people will argue whether or not it's quote unquote canon or not and all of this shit. Like it's very it's very just reminiscent of the same stuff going on in that, and if they're going to bring that shit to TV, I would expect nothing less, I guess.
Yeah, that Marvel
um
is able to recreate the comic book experience in a different medium is pretty fucking cool. I
yeah.
will admit that. It's just I don't know. She-Hulk is a dear property to me.
Yeah.
She-Hulk books were books that I got when I was a kid. I think I have like 3 copies of the 50th issue, and then I have like a bunch of the 100th issue. Because like Dan Slott's run on She-Hulk in like 2004, I think is when he started, maybe 2003. It really opened up my eyes to what a comic book world could be like. It world built the Marvel universe for me in ways that it had never been before. And when you say like it is going to reference big events, the big event that I think of it referencing, and it didn't do this till like issue 7 or 8, was the death of Hawkeye in Avengers Disassembled. And the fact that because this is a time crime, the jury of the peers needs to be plucked from time. So one of the jurors is Clint Barton, and it's pre him dying, and She-Hulk wrestling with this whole, do I tell him that he dies? Like, what am I supposed to do here? He's my friend. I miss him. Seeing him again is, first of all, difficult for her because, you know, I watched him die, and then it's like, what am I supposed to do? I'm just supposed to let him go back and die? Like, yeah. I have the ability to stop it, and look at all these other people and how they break the rules. Heroes who break the rules, right? Iron Man and all of these things. And it was one of the greatest things that I've ever read. Like, it really got my mind thinking. And then the other thing that I just love from the She-Hulk comic books is that every comic book that exists in our world exists in their world as historical documentation.
Right.
So the law library is just like a bunch of long boxes full of every issue of Marvel Comics. And so she has her paralegal, who I actually think is Howard the Duck, like for some reason in the issue, like it's explained.
Her and Howard have a long history, and honestly, I might have read more She-Hulk because of Howard the Duck than any other character. Yeah,
exactly. But yeah, so that's the thing. So there you go. You have Howard the Duck there, and she's like, we need to try to pull these issues to look for precedent or like examples of when this villain wasn't so villainous.
Yeah. And like the other great thing that the show is going to really allow, because of everything that you've just talked about, is that a lot of those silly questions that people have been like asking for years, right? About like, well, what do they do when they tear a building down? Like, who's responsible for that? Like, She-Hulk is a great way for them to explore that kind of stuff, right? Like, what does it mean to be a superhero is literally, I think, one of the first questions asked in the first episode, right? Is it their responsibility to use their powers to protect people or not, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm very, very curious to see how they tackle those, because I think they're unanswerable questions, and I think they do themselves a huge disservice if they try to answer them, right?
Oh man, I'm so upset. I'm upset for you. The second episode is so good.
I mean, that's great to hear, and I'm not surprised, right? Like, as I'm excited. Yeah, no, I'm very, very much love that first episode, and I'm excited for more. And I'm just really curious to see what they're going to try and do to the universe writ large with this story, because they, as we've pointed out, they've tried to make big like events in these shows happen, and they don't always succeed in the long run, as we've seen now with everything that happened with WandaVision.
I don't know. Timeline wise, I wish that She-Hulk had come sooner. I don't think I'd have had my problems with Miss Marvel, specifically with Avenger Con, if we were able to see more street level reactions to superheroes.
I guess. Why can't you just take what happened in Miss Marvel as the first time we get to learn about this? That it's been there this whole time. We've known it must be. I mean, we saw in friggin' Hawkeye, just to bring it up, like Rogers the musical, right?
Rogers the musical feels I guess
We
it.
know that we know that there is a whole part of this world that we are not aware of.
Yeah.
And as you're saying, She-Hulk is giving us a glimpse into that world in a way that really kind of starts to lay down the groundwork for what that is. But like, rather than be offended by what happened in Ms. Marvel, why can that not be the spark to what then leads to this larger stuff?
Can I be honest with you with why it bothers me so much? Is because it seems like so comic convention, every convention, right, starts from a glimmer, right? No convention really starts as a roaring fire. It's always a spark. You have that first convention. The Rhode Island Comic Con started as an event that took place at the living room.
Right.
And now it's at the convention center and it's getting all these things. And it's
You know
just
what the living room is? It's a warehouse in an industrial part of Providence that they turned into an event space. So very much like exactly the space that they go
like
to in Miss Marvel.
right. Then it's weird that they're at like the actual Camp Lehigh where Captain America was made. I don't know.
I mean, as a Boy Scout that camped on a bunch of derelict military bases in that area, like that's just what there is in that area of the country. I don't know.
Yes, I mean, like we know that Zemo was there. You'd think that DODC would have set up there, that it wouldn't. I don't know. Whatever.
Maybe they did. Like that's a legitimate thing. But what if they are there and they let something like this happen so that they can at least monitor it, right?
And
Rather
they do,
than
and that's
stop
how
it
they
from
found out
happening.
about Miss Marvel. I mean,
Right,
there's a
right.
lot of argument there. It's one of those things, but it's the fact for me that AvengerCon in Miss Marvel was clearly the spark and not a flame. That it was meant to be the first convention, and it weirdly felt like it was a hyper established thing, but also something that was done on the cheap. It just my mind just can't rationalize it, dude.
To the Comic-Con too, right?
Yeah.
Like you got to think about convention history. There's been video game and fandom conventions and comic book conventions forever for everywhere. I mean, like in Utah, we've got one of the oldest ones with what's called Fan X, and they actually had to stop calling themselves Fan X Comic-Con or something. Like they almost got sued by Comic-Con writ large, even though they've been around longer than Comic-Con because Comic-Con got so big. So like there's also that element to it, right? Is I'm curious if that convention is just the first one that is like big in that area. Right, like if there's been other conventions in other parts of the world,
yeah.
Right, and maybe they're not called Avenger Con, maybe they're like Hero Con, or maybe there's like some fucked up guys that, as we know in this world exist, probably get together and do villain cons and shit like that, right? Like there's all sorts of weird possibilities. The biggest thing that it does is it introduces the fact that there are fans, there is a fandom, but we've been getting hints of that for years in the Marvel universe.
Yeah. I mean, you keep using Rogers the musical. Captain Erogiker. That's what I just called him. I called him Captain Erogiker.
Captain America, right.
Captain America. He's like a known person. Like you learn about him in history class. I don't know if you're learning about Ant-Man. You're learning about Iron Man. It's just
I don't know, man, because by this point we've had Endgame happen, and like Ant-Man is the one that brings everybody
Ant-Man
back.
is the big guy in Rogers. That's a good point.
Why would he not be celebrated? Right?
I know. It's strange. I guess it's just it was hard for me to rationalize. That's all it is. But then She-Hulk and the stuff that She-Hulk is doing, but also you'll see in the second episode that the timeline for She-Hulk and where it fits in is very. I mean, if you go to Disney Plus right now,
I was gonna say you don't have to watch the episode. Disney Plus lays out the timeline of their shit, and She-Hulk is very noticeably not the latest in the timeline.
Yeah, it's earlier. It's a little bit earlier, and I'm just like, man, a lot of the problems that I had are being answered by this. And then the question for me is this backdoor retconning to make everything work for people like Devon Decker, or was this always the plan? But due to the production and the way everything got thrown off, She-Hulk didn't get to happen. So now it feels like explanation after the fact.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that one of the biggest things about the Marvel Universe, the first decade, right? Like Iron Man to Endgame, a lot of people really felt like they were stuck in this have to go and watch. We've talked about that, right? Like that FOMO feeling of having to go to everything. It really does feel like since Endgame, they have done everything in their power to give the audience permission to just like enjoy it. And we've talked a lot about like the coda that is No Way Home, right, or Far From Home. And we've talked
they're
about
both kind of codas now in really weird ways, but I get what you're saying. Yeah.
And then there's so many different ways in which they need to try and bring in new audiences and things like that. That I think also one of the things is just like not really worrying about things like where things fit in the timeline. Like on the grand scheme of things, yes, but not in the release sense, right? You don't need to get She-Hulk out before Miss Marvel. It's okay. We'll just fill in those blanks with She-Hulk later. Again, going back to the way that comics have worked forever, is this idea of there being time jumps and leaps and just having to accept that characters might know a thing now that they didn't in the last arc and stuff like that. And then, 5 years later, an artist, much like you, who had a problem with that, comes in and corrects by writing their one shot that covers that distance, right, or some shit like that. Like there's all sorts of like weird elements of that, and so part of it is definitely for somebody that's watching everything, you start to notice where they all don't quite fit together. But for somebody that's a casual viewer, that's not really like a huge concern, I guess would be the thing I'd say, right? It's more enjoyable that I don't have to. And maybe every now and then, as a casual viewer, I get to say, oh, right, this is why in Ms. Marvel this happens and things like that. Like that's fun again. I rather than getting caught up in it and like having it kind of throw me off, like I'm just going for the ride, I guess, with a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, and as soon as the second episode of Miss Marvel happened, I was on board. It was just that first episode it was a barrier to entry for me. And maybe it was just Marvel fatigue and then just like, oh, and this is what we're doing now. And I'd believe that. I was definitely burnt out a little bit, and I feel reinvigorated by something like Love and Thunder and now She-Hulk. But again, of course I would feel invigorated by Thor. Which is literally the shit that I loved as a kid, and She-Hulk, which is the stuff that brought me back as a teenager. Yeah. Like, it makes sense that those properties that I really do have more invested in would be the things that I would care about. And it's not that Miss Marvel, I feel like they really did her dirty in the video game. I really don't like her in the video game, and
you're preaching to the choir on that.
Yeah,
but yes.
No, and that's the thing. So it kind of colored my interpretation of what they might do with that character in the MCU. Because it's another thing where it's like it's sort of a lesser known character, so we get to build into it whatever we want. That's sort of how I felt they approached it in the game. And they failed miserably there. And I'm happy that, it had some stink on it. And again, it was a Devon problem. I will admit that. It comes from where I was approaching it. So...
Yeah, well, luckily there's not enough people in the world playing Avengers for that to be a problem, really.
It's only $2 from the publisher.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, no, excited about more She-Hulk and all that.
I'm excited for you to watch the second episode. I cannot... I can't.
Well, maybe I'll see what the fam's up to.
Let me know when you do, because it will. Oh, I'm excited for the stuff.
Part of it is also the weird Thursday release. They used to be doing Wednesday releases, and that gave us a night to watch it. And now it's like, oh, we're already a week behind. We might as well wait for there's a bunch. And it's like, Thursday's such a weird day. Why not wait till Friday?
That's the same sort of argument. Can I tell you why it was Thursday? I have a theory as to why they moved to Thursday.
Comedy Thursday, right? Like Thursday night, like Seinfeld and 30 Rock and all that. Like that's my theory, is they're trying to emulate that must-see TV Thursday night.
Oh, I was gonna blame the Orville. And not in a negative way. I don't want to be mean to the Orville. I love the Orville. Season 3 of the Orville, New Horizons, fantastic television. But Orville went back to a Thursday release, and they saw really good numbers on people watching the Orville. To the fact that they migrated it over to Disney Plus, right? Like they don't do that if it's just doing all right on Hulu. Let's bring it over to Disney Plus and do that whole thing. They brought that over because they're like, this has a market. It did a good job, and the numbers they were seeing, people tuning in to watch it on Thursday. But that's not crazy, because that's when the Orville was on. The Orville was on Thursdays.
Right.
So the move from Friday to Wednesday made sense for me for the release of the Marvel stuff, because, and I think that it totally fell onto, movies were coming out again. So if people wanted to make sure that they were caught up before the movie released, then they can watch it on Wednesday and they'll feel like I can go see the movie, and anything that happened in the show that might be referenced in this movie, I should know everything.
Wednesday was also a great day to put it out because that gave everybody that did watch it 2 days to convince other people to watch it over the weekend, right?
Yeah.
Like it fed into weekend numbers because of the FOMO pull, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You got to see it.
I mean, we talked about that was their marketing for a long time, especially in the pandemic, was this like, we're going to ruin it. We're going to ruin it. We're the crazy people who are going to release the chinchilla in your house. Okay, please don't release a chinchilla in my house, Disney. I will watch the Marvel movie. And it's so moving it to Wednesday because also that's like, I'm going to see it Friday night so I can watch whatever releases on Friday in the morning. But no, they want those lucrative Thursday pre-show dollars because that money all gets counted into Friday, but it's like 3 extra screenings of revenue that they get to count as part of the weekend release.
Right.
So they want that. So that is 100% why they moved from Friday to Wednesday. And now the move to Thursday, there's not a new Marvel movie until November, right? You can say what you want about the Spider-Man No Way Home super fun size release that's coming sometime in September, right? Like,
if it comes out, I don't know. I am very excited for that movie, but also if it falls on its face and they don't end up releasing it, I am not gonna cry.
I mean, I've seen posters at the movie theater for it.
I've seen posters at the movie theater too for plenty of movies that didn't come out over the last 4 years. So like we live in a very particularly weird time, Devon.
That's a good point. But by all accounts, it looks like it's happening. The release date seems to be shifting. I mean, it's got to be after Disney Plus Day, which is now in September.
Disney doesn't have much of a say in this one, though. Remember, Sony also has their hands in the pot on this particular movie. So it's not, and I would argue that this doesn't feel like a very Disney move.
You say that, but I mean, come on, Avengers Endgame did it.
Very Sony.
No, it's
move.
not. You're wrong. You're blinded by your love of Disney from when you were a child.
No, because Disney's also releasing Avatar in order to get I know that Disney's willing to do the re-release. I mean, you're talking to a guy that went to go see the 3D version of Nightmare Before Christmas 3 times in his life every time it came out.
You're talking to the guy who's seen Beauty and the Beast every single time it's been released in theaters.
It's the poor naming. Like, let's be honest, it is the really poor naming convention of this. It feels very much like what happened with Morbius, right? It feels like the same people that made that decision about the re-release of Morbius and getting fucking Leto to get on screen and literally say the words Morbin time. Like, that feels like the same person that also made the decision about what's happening here. It couldn't happen without Disney's approval. Let's not kid ourselves. Disney's allowing this to happen and, in fact, probably funding a lot of it with the hopes of making money back. But they're also kind of just letting the kids play with the toys on the playground because they've got other toys to play with, right? They're not driving this bus.
That's really interesting. Like, in terms of everything that you just said, and comparing it to the Morbius re-release, Disney re-released Endgame, right? They did that as soon they had passed Avatar, right?
They had passed Avatar, then Avatar passed them.
So they re-released Endgame with extra footage, and they were able to pass Avatar again. Like, that was the thing they did. And of course, the whole time they're laughing all the way to the fucking bank because they own both of them. The horses, right?
Avatar, right? And they had like an Avatar world opening that they wanted to promote and all that. Yeah.
So all the ridiculousness of that aside, it's really interesting that now that Sony is definitely involved in No Way Home. You can't deny it. But they had that fiasco with re-releasing Morbius. In the eyes of the public, and I'm not just saying you, I'm saying anybody, they look at that and they might say, oh, that's Sony just trying to get some extra money, as opposed to the fact that, like, well, Disney has done this with a couple of the movies that have released in the past few years. Now, granted, 2 years and a global pandemic happened since the last time Disney did it, so it's not going to be the freshest thought in your mind, but it is. As soon as they announced the More Fun Stuff edition, which is, I think, the actual name for it, the immediate thing that jumped to my mind was the expanded release of Endgame. that was supposed to
You
have
know,
new scenes.
but you know why I think it really is like, again, Disney's, I'm not freeing Disney from blame, but I really
Yeah.
feel like Disney is taking a backseat and just letting Sony do what it wants because it's just going to make its money no matter what. Like, is that with a Disney re-release, you would have some more solid information. Maybe not a release date because of how crazy things have been, but like you'd have like a social media push, like all of the shit that before the first version of the movie came out. Right, there was like a Twitter post a week from different people involved with the movie. You'd have a whole bunch of YouTube stuff that was going on. You know, you'd be getting your guys out there on fucking Hot Ones and shit like that. Like there'd be a lot more behind the release in terms of like trying to give the audience a reason to go. I'm not saying they'd be good reasons. I'm
Yeah.
not saying they'd succeed in justifying re-releasing it, but they'd be making more of an effort to show you why this was the decision that they're making and why it's worth us putting our dollars towards it. And the fact that you're not seeing any of it, it really feels like because of what happened after Morbius, somebody was just like, oh, well, we already gave you the okay to do this, but you've botched that so bad, so we're just gonna just kind of sit on this and watch and basically let it die on the vine. Like it feels like there's a too many cooks in the kitchen moment going on here, and that makes sense with what goes on with the history of Spider-Man, of deciding to put this thing out and then nobody wanting to take responsibility for it now because of how much it's already kind of started to stumble.
So there's two paths that could go there, right? Path number one is maybe they don't want to put the marketing. They want to see if just the merit of the movie can sell the movie to get the stuff. That's,
What company or corporation are you dreaming this is?
I
Okay,
guess
okay.
the company or corporation that has the money to spare to like put out a re-release and it really not affect their bottom line. Heck, maybe they could use it as a tax write-off, as we've been seeing with other
So,
individuals.
for
But
instance, when Endgame came out, just as
yeah,
an example to this, when the re-release of Endgame was happening, there was so much of a push on YouTube and Twitch. Every other ad I saw was come and see Endgame again, like come and experience Endgame. They added like 4 minutes to it or something, right?
yeah,
Whatever,
it was an
whatever the count was, right?
inconsequential
Whatever the
thing.
count was, though, the ad like leaned on that, like with 4 extra minutes, like that. Like I saw those nonstop. I honestly forget about the Spider-Man release until like we talk about it because I see nothing about it anywhere. Like I'm glad you're seeing a poster. I haven't. Like that's it's cool that you in a major city, I guess. Maybe I don't know. To be fair, I am only going out to like local cinemas currently and like the like just outside of Salt Lake
I'm
area. Maybe
driving by the Warwick Showcase Cinema, which is the major like
yeah.
cinema now, because there's still the one in the mall, but the mall is gone. So the Warwick Mall location that was like a dedicated building for it is gone. So that's it. And they've also had this huge big push with the fact that now we have the stadium seating with
Yeah.
you choose your seat and all that other blah blah blah. But driving by and it's like a big poster, and I'm like, wow, I can't believe they did posters for that. And the poster they did for it, I mean, it kind of looks like let's do it on the cheap. They just
Yeah.
kind of threw every character in. Betty is there. Betty Brant is there, and she looks like MJ. Like it's one of those things where that was floating around Twitter as the who the fuck is this on the poster? Because it almost looked like did they add like Mary Jane Watson to the movie? Like, do I need to go see the more fun stuff edition because maybe Kristen Dunst is going to show up? Kristen Dunst.
Yeah, no, it's wild because like I have not heard hide nor hair of
Yeah.
this release since you and I have talked about it last, and like the couple of times off mic we have mentioned it. Like that's really the only time I hear about this.
But that's where the other road comes from, right? The one road is let's not spend a lot of money on it. Let's just let this one happen organically and see if the love for this movie was because it was the first major movie that people could go back out to, or if it's not there, and maybe I mean like Disney wanting to test the water to see if we want to continue to play ball with Sony after everything, especially after what No Way Home represents for that character and what it's represented for all of the other things that are going on in the MCU. Like, I feel like they're trying to find a new Peter Parker in the grossest way possible. Where at the end of frickin' Far From Home, it felt like he was going to be the new Tony Stark.
Well, right, and then everything that happened.
Yeah.
I mean, I can guarantee you that Disney has basically written off like any future stuff with using those characters. I think what they're in the grand scheme of things, right? The larger scheme outside of just the release of this movie, although including the release of this movie, is I also the other reason why I think Sony is the one behind it, but Disney is letting them do it, is Disney's going to win by outliving Sony. That's what they do, is they wear people the fuck down, right? And so they're letting Sony just do all of this shit. Basically, they give them a bunch of sugar so that they can go on a friggin' sugar high for a few years. And they said, sure, go and use all of this stuff that's Spider-Man related. We won't even touch it. You can just have it. And then they're going to go out. They're going to do a bunch of Spider-Man-esque stuff that falls on its face and doesn't work. In theory, I'm not going to get into whether or not, but in theory, the idea is that Sony goes out, fails, and at some point Sony comes back hat in hand and says, can you just buy this from us, because we can't put up with this anymore. We've put too much money and failed too many times, and it's going to be a lower price, right? Like it's a business tactic. And so in that, like, Disney allowing Sony to go out and put out the more fun edition and letting it fail is just more, it's more in the end better for them for that to happen. So like, I also think Disney's not really the ones driving the bus because they don't want it to succeed, which is a very cynical way of looking at things, but it does give them a lot of ammunition in the coming years if they can come at Sony and say, look, you gave it a good college try, but you just have not made this work for a decade now. Like, so give it to us, sell it to us, one big old buyout, and then you never have to spend money on Spider-Man again. And Disney will win that eventually. That is eventually going to be what's going to happen, because Disney, as we've mentioned, has the money to wait this kind of shit.
No Way Home almost didn't happen. By all accounts, but the way the story goes online, it was Tom Holland coming in and saying, can we just do this one last movie, guys?
Right,
Can we, like, please? I really just want to play Spider-Man one more time. So that's a good point. And also, it's not as if there isn't precedent there, right? Amazing Spider-Man 2, all of the plans that Sony had, and then when that movie fell short of expectations, and I like Amazing Spider-Man 2, after rewatching it, it's a really good Spider-Man story.
It's a phenomenal Spider-Man story. The ending to that movie is legitimately heart-wrenching. Like, yeah.
And it's a wonderful movie, but then Sony was just like, we don't know what we're doing, which is what allowed Disney to step in and say, well, see, you got that Spider-Man on your hands.
Yeah, see, you got that there Spider-Boy.
Maybe you want to put him in Civil War and we see what happens.
Yeah.
Like, no, there's precedent. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the other part of that road, right, is the fact that Disney Plus Day has been moved from November 12th, when Disney Plus launched, to September 8th. By all accounts, the reasoning for that is so that it can coincide with the D23 Expo, which happens in September always.
I mean, that's cool. I mean, it's a birthday for a streaming service, so like, I don't care. Like, there are people out there that are just like, it just makes no sense, and it's just like, does it have to? I mean, like, it's a business deciding to sell you a bunch of stuff on it. It's like if every company out there decided to move Black Friday and call it, I don't know, something like Cyber Monday, and nobody seemed to lose their shit about that.
Or like, tax-free weekend.
Right. Like, there's all sorts of it's always a business tactic, guys. Don't get married to it. Yeah,
right. But with the fact that it is coming September 8th now, and they're going to have Thor: Love and Thunder is going to be coming to Disney Plus that day. Some other stuff, Pinocchio releases that day.
That day is one of the other big ones. Yeah,
people are going to go to Disney Plus that day. So if the release date for the more fun stuff edition of Spider-Man is wrapped up in the Disney Plus Day festivities, or even D23, then you have all your eyes on it already. Right?
Imagine if one of the big Disney, because the other big thing about the Disney Plus stuff is there's going to be stuff that we also don't know about.
Right.
That releases, like, that's kind of, or at least that's
it better be Game Changers season 2. I'm waiting for more Mighty Ducks.
I mean, imagine though if they come on on September 8th and they go, and Spider-Man is coming back home to Disney, right? And they suddenly announce they're bringing all of the Spider-Mans all together back to the House of Mouse for at least a little limited amount of time, because as we've seen, Disney's not afraid to lose library. They have no fear in losing the licensed stuff. So like, but imagine if they say that, and then that creates all this buzz all of a sudden for Spider-Man once again, and then the more fun stuff edition comes out a few weeks later for everybody to go and see in theaters again, right?
Like it feels like it might be a marketing technique. And the other reason why I feel that is all of these toy companies that are releasing the 3 Spider-Man sets, like SH Figuarts is doing a set that is Friendly Neighborhood amazing, and MCU Spider-Man, in addition to the Marvel Legends one from Hasbro. Like, they're everywhere, and there hasn't been a lot of information on whether or not it will come with unmasked heads, which arguably, if you're going to get a set of the three Spider-Men in that movie, you'd want the unmasked heads. Otherwise, you're just getting three Spider-Men. What is to say that it's not just all Tom Holland there? Right?
Wait, I mean, they have distinctive looks, like
yeah,
coloring and,
right.
and detail
They,
work.
they
So
look great. The figures,
yeah,
as we've seen them, look really good. But the head reveals, they revealed the Andrew Garfield one. No, they've revealed the Tobey Maguire one for the SH Figure Arts. That's the only one that's been revealed. But by all accounts, like the people who talk in the back rooms, other licensing for likenesses have come through. And the thought is that they're probably holding it back to release it as a way to drive people to go see the More Fun Stuff edition.
yeah, makes
So,
sense. I
like,
mean, it all makes sense. I mean,
yeah.
In terms of
In
like
terms of
Spider-Man,
marketing, the fact that
yeah,
we haven't heard anything makes me feel like, but I think they're waiting for a big push to make sure that people go and do it. I don't
yeah.
think they want people to anticipate the re-release. I think they want it to be sort of a impulse buy in terms of going to go see that movie again.
Yeah, I don't know what their true expectations are in the end for like this in terms of like money, right? And these decisions are always made to make money. Like, no, they're not doing this out of the kindness of their heart. Like, so what do they think is going to happen? I'm just so curious to hear what they like. What is the mark they're trying to hit? At least with the Avengers stuff, you could point to like the back and forth with Avatar, and that was at least something driving like the desire to do that, right? Even though in the end, as we've pointed out, it was all dumb because it was just Disney fighting with Disney. But like this idea being that
or very intelligent because it was Disney
well,
fighting
right.
with Disney.
But that was just it, right? Is it gave the people like something to chew on, right? And that's just not there with this one. They have not done enough groundwork to give even me, somebody who loves this movie, reason enough to be excited. You know, like I said at the beginning of this whole conversation, if it happens, like I'm all for it, like that's rad. But if it doesn't happen, I'm not going to lose any sleep over this one. You know, it's not like if they said that they were pulling the plug on the movie entirely, which there were times when I was convinced that was going to happen with all of the shit going on between the pandemic and the Sony Disney stuff. So the fact that the movie already exists is already a win for me. I don't need this edition, this version.
True. I guess where I would also light it, has Top Gun Maverick outdone Spider-Man No Way Home?
I think so. I'm pretty
Okay.
sure that it's outdone pretty much everything in the universe. Yeah, Top Gun Maverick turns out that the greatest movie ever made was just Tom Cruise in a plane, and we kind of knew that all along, but he came back to prove it once again.
Yeah, I don't know. We watched it last night, and it's enjoyable, but I got thoughts on it. But I'll wait until you see it. I don't want to color your experience with it.
I don't
I know
know
you
if I'm
don't
ever
care.
gonna watch it.
I know.
It's not. It's and like I want to make this very clear because Top Gun is one of those movies that there are people out there with opinions on that movie, right? It is a great film. Top Gun, the original movie. I remember my times watching it. The few times that I have seen the original movie, I remember my times watching it and not disliking it. I'm not a vehicle guy, I guess you'd say. It's the same thing with the Fast and the Furious movies. I like the Fast and the Furious movies because of the ridiculous shit that happens. Like dropping out of an airplane in a car is fucking nuts. I don't care what kind of car it is or what. Like if it's just I live in this weird world in that I love Top Gear, right? Like I love the show Top Gear, but I love the show Top Gear because I just like seeing pretty cars go fast and then putting ridiculous shit on them, right? Like I couldn't sit back and tell you like the make and model in which Ford really kind of broke the mold with their shit. Like I'm not that guy, right? And I feel like Top Gun is the kind of movie where if you like good film, good cinema, it's serviceable enough, more than serviceable enough in a lot of areas. It's a good film. It is a well-made film. But if you truly want to become a fan of Top Gun, you have to get into that whole like aerospace display shit. Like there are people out here that go to air shows every year, and it's like a huge thing for them. We have an air base nearby, and it's a big thing when the air show happens. I've never been. I just am not that kind of fan, right? And so because of that, I'm always in this weird place with Top Gun where people are like, Top Gun, right? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I too like Days of Thunder, the prequel. I don't know, I'm in it. I'll watch it, but like I just can't wax poetically about it for hours at a time. It's like some people can. So when the sequel came out, I was, intrigued because a sequel to Top Gun, wild, like Tom Cruise coming back with his character. I cannot believe how it's become this like cultural thing. And like all power to it. Like it's amazing that it has. I still don't feel the need to go see it. I'm really happy that fans have it. And if it shows up in front of me, I'm not going to say no. If I'm at a party sometime and somebody puts on Top Gun Maverick, I'm not going to like walk out of the room, right? But like I'm probably never going to push myself to go see that film.
All right. Well, here's the deal. Here's the say report of it all. If you still haven't seen it before the anniversary, its 1 year anniversary of being released in theaters, then I will talk about it. But I don't want to chance ruining what your experience with that film could be, especially since it's now out there in the world where you could go to a party and it get thrown on, or you could be with people that are like, hey, let's check out Top Gun Maverick.
I know people that like took the day off work to go with their family to go see the new Top Gun movie.
Yeah, it's one of those.
That's just like that is just so foreign to me. Like I love that those kinds of people exist. I love I love when fans exist. Well, no, but I love meeting a fan base that I am not like at all a part of. Like it's so rare for me to find a topic that I both don't know anything about and everybody else seems to. Like if everybody else knows a thing or two about a thing, I have probably stumbled across it in some fashion, whether it's just like fucking like Reddit has thrown it in my face for a while, so I know too much about it because I've seen every meme in the universe, or like I grew up around like my mom and my dad watching movies, and so like I have this kind of like this history of film that is built in because of my mom and dad being big movie people as well. Like there's always some reason why I've been in a thing, right? Top Gun is one of those rare instances where I've never had anybody in my life that really loved that movie that was close enough to me that I had to like become a fan in order to keep up, right? Like that just never happened with Top Gun. And so it's crazy to me when I meet somebody that is in that world, because it's just such a foreign world to me.
Yeah, I mean Top Gun for me, like I don't think that I'm in that world either. Top Gun was not a movie to me. Top Gun was a soundtrack. It was one of those, I got a CD player and I needed CDs, and what I looked to fill out a CD collection that was varied was movie soundtracks, because you're not just getting one artist, right? You're getting a variety of artists, and soundtracks in like the 80s, the soundtrack was a big deal. We've talked about it before. Before you could own the movie, the soundtrack was kind of your only way to relive the movie, because you couldn't just pop it on or throw on HBO.
I think you'd be forgiven. Yeah. I think you'd be forgiven if you thought of Top Gun as one of those movies where the soundtrack came first, right? Which was a big thing that happened in the 80s. We got the licensing to these 5 songs. What movie can we put them under that works for all of them, right? And then like you get like entire movies like built around them. Like, like the entirety of any band film, like Rock and Roll High School with the Ramones and shit like that, where it's just like, okay, here's all the music. What can we do to kind of just give them excuse for this to be playing at some point? Xanadu. That kind of shit, right? Like, but it's not, right? That's what I mean when I say that I respect the fact that it is an actual film. It's a film, not a sandwich, right?
Well, I mean, you say that, but Kenny Loggins, it's sort of the weird sequel to Footloose in terms of Kenny Loggins did this great music for Footloose. Kenny Loggins, you got any other songs? Oh, I got this song about playing with the boys. I got the song about being in danger in some kind of zone.
So that is something that I can say about Top Gun that I do really respect, right? Is the fact that they've always gone hard on the concept. Yeah. Yes, it may have come from the idea of Kenny Loggins having an extra song, and they were like, what can we do to put with this song? But then they said, okay, but let's make the movie a good movie, right? Yeah. And to that same point, they kind of rode like the irony, like the ironic like love of Top Gun that kind of popped up in the 2000s, 2010s as we started to review it as like kind of like a homoerotic love letter, right? And like it became that thing that inevitably happens with ironic fan bases, where eventually we all kind of then just, I say we, I mean, like as a culture,
Even
like
culturally, yeah.
we fell back in love with Top Gun ironically, and then it was no longer ironic, right? And then suddenly now here we are with the sequel being this huge slam hit, and it's because they rode that wave. They knew what they were doing, much like with the first one. They saw that the fans were there, but they took their time and made something that was worth going to, which is not what every company does. Too many people, Morbius, jump in at the beginning of like the revamp, the revitalization of the fan base, and it's a cash grab, and it feels like a cash grab. It feels cheap. It doesn't feel like any effort was put in, and people walk away again. But that's not what they did. They bided their time, because this is something that's been in the works now for over a decade, right? Because
2010, like, I spent a night drinking in a bar until 4 a.m. with this comedian from New York, and we wrote a spec script for Top Gun 2, because he had like an idea, and he's like, "You're the first person I've ever met who like might be able to do something with this idea. I'd like to share it with you." And his idea, since it's not what Top Gun 2 is, and also 10 years feels like the statute of limitations, is the fact that it's Pete Mitchell's daughter who is now going to Miramar. And that's the whole story. But, like, you don't understand that it's Pete Mitchell's daughter until, like, the big reveal. Right. Of the fact that, like, you know, they've opened up Miramar to not just male pilots. They want the best of the best. So the female pilots are now getting to go to Top Gun and prove their worth. So then this girl is there, and she's trying to prove herself. And then, like, the break into two is the fact that Pete Mitchell is her father. And it was just like, and we wrote it, and like most of it was bourbon fueled insanity written on fucking napkins.
The problem with a reveal like that nowadays is it wouldn't survive social media. That you'd have to sell the movie on that, which would burn that like surprise. Because if you didn't, then it would get out there and it would ruin the movie for everybody. So you're better off burning that bridge yourself so that it could be a controlled burn, right?
Yeah. I mean, you got to think though, this is pre Star Trek Into Darkness, right, where the director could say, "He's not Khan, fuck off." And then when he is Khan, you're like, "Oh, he was Khan," and you don't remember that the creator of the thing flat lied to you.
I mean, I think a lot of people did remember, actually. I think that might be the first example where people started to say,
you're expected to not remember that the creator lied to you. Like, that's the hope, is that, but we gave you Khan. Yeah, but you fucking lied to me. Yeah. But or the other,
I mean, give all the shit in the world to Abrams and the crew behind that. But the other big one that I think of in this all the time, I was actually just watching this the other day, is Prometheus, and then being like, it's not related to Alien. It's not related to Alien. And then like the entire movie is all about the history of Alien.
It's about how Bishop was running and jumping and furiously masturbating.
Oh man.
Good times, great oldies. But yeah, I mean, it was enjoyable. But here's what I will say, and this is specifically a spoiler for listeners of the Say Report, and maybe a spoiler to you, Sejohn. Top Gun Maverick feels like a great sequel to Hot Shots. And I will leave that out there. That is what I'm going to say. Because, yeah, more than enough times did we make hot shot level commentary about Top Gun Maverick, and then everybody in the room was like, "We're in a movie theater. Like, we can't do this. We know what we're all doing. We know what we're all seeing. Let's just let the movie happen."
Yeah.
But it was fun. It was really great to have the whole family together, and for my father to stay awake and like engaged the whole time. Like nice. it was excellent. Like it was cool. And good cast, and it's really enjoyable. But the fact that it like reinvigorated cinema, and people are calling it the greatest thing to ever happen. I got some thoughts on that.
Well, and the only thing that I can say about that, as somebody that has not seen the movie, but I am very excited to kind of look at this film as I'm trying to think of a nice way to put this. It doesn't appear to be a groundbreaking film in any meaningful way, but that doesn't mean that it shouldn't succeed. And we've been saying that for a long time, is we've kind of lost that like middle tier of like filmmaking fun, where sometimes you just make a movie for people to just watch. It doesn't have to be the Oscar winner. It doesn't have to be the new type of action. It doesn't have to break the mold. It can just be a movie people fucking enjoy. And it feels like for so long like we've lost that. Like filmmakers have been so hungry to be the next big thing in some way for some reason that nobody out there just makes movies anymore. And that is entirely because the studio system that is currently in place doesn't reward that. So why would filmmakers want to do that when they're not? They'd rather go out and just make the piece of art they want to fucking make now, because it's win or lose. Either they make that piece of art and it succeeds and they get to keep making art, or they lose and they're out of the fucking game. So they might as well just do it. In the past, it used to be like, yeah, you tried that really artsy thing, and we'll give you that try again in a couple of movies. But for right now, can you direct the next Terminator movie for us? Can you direct the next Alien movie for us? And then we'll let you kind of do your own thing again, Cameron, right? Like that's how those guys got where they were, was putting in their time doing these other things. And like it just feels like that's not a part of the game anymore. So it's really cool to me to see a movie like Top Gun Maverick get where it is and be successful, even though by all accounts, even the people I know out here that did love it and did see it and did lead to its huge thing, they openly admit that like it's the best popcorn flick they've ever seen. And I just don't know the last time anybody's excitedly talked about a popcorn film like this before.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting, though, because when you consider the fact that it's Skydance, so it's Tom Cruise who is essentially footing the bill and taking all of the risk here at this thing. So it isn't like some middling indie thing. It is somebody who's well off and well established in Hollywood. It is all of the Mission Impossible guys who are working on the script. Chris McFeely is there. And, you know, from Scream 3, Erin Kruger helped to write the screenplay for Top Gun Maverick. So it's like names that you know. It's very interesting because you say that it's sort of like that middling popcorn movie. And yes, we have sort of lost that. So it's exciting to see one come along.
I mean, big names are what made those movies. Think about the likes of like Michael Bay. Michael Bay was no slouch when he was making like Bad Boys, right? Like he he just like the
or
people
Spike Jonze. They were known for directing. It's just, I don't know. I couldn't tell you the name of the director of Top Gun Maverick, but I can tell you all the money behind it and all the pedigree of like, this guy wrote all of the Mission Impossible movies that you actually liked.
I just like that there was definitely a guy on this movie whose entire job was to follow Tom Cruise around with a soapbox for him to stand on so that he was at least 3 inches taller.
There's a scene where that soapbox is forgotten. It is like, I want to make it my background. As much as Hellboy 2019 has like been my background forever, this moment where Miles Teller just towers over Tom Cruise, is wonderful.
Excellent, man. Excellent.
Excellent. Yes. So that's all the movie and TV chat. I got to talk about something that I'm participating in, and I'm excited about this because weirdly I followed a Twitter ad and it actually was real and is a real thing that's happening for me.
I'm so mad at you for that, but okay.
For what?
For basically clickbaiting yourself into something real. It's like getting one of those letters about, I need to hide $10 million in your bank account, and then somebody actually shows up with a check for $10 million.
And it's a real person, and they don't ask anything from you.
Right,
yeah, it's
right.
Well, I mean, it's Texas A&M. Like before I answered the call that this thing was for, it was like I did my due diligence and saw that Ion eSports survey.
Are you an eSports Ghostbuster?
No, they wanted to see how activity and diet affected the reaction time and the abilities of esport athletes. And, you know, even though I might not be like a Fortnite or COD or that other one that everybody plays that I can't think of the name of right now.
League of Legends? I mean, that's one of the big ones.
Command and Conquer is what I was going to say, but that's not what I mean. It's Counter-Strike is the one that I... Right, that's in the same vein as like the Half-Life games, right? Or am I just an idiot right now?
Counter-Strike is definitely one that gets a lot of play in tournaments.
Like, I feel like it's.
I mean, the thing is the big thing in esports is that I think one of the biggest problems with esports is that there are so many different games that fall in. I mean, like, you know, there are Smash tournaments out there. Like it's like there's so like the idea that like putting it all under the monolith of just esports is really not the best way to talk about it. But that's a conversation.
But the fact that it is under the monolith of esports is why I think I was appealing to them
Yeah.
as a subject because basically they're broken down into first person shooters and fighters. Like those are the top things that you think of when you think of esports. But there are speedrunning competitions. There are like randomizer tournaments and those things, or like the stuff that I did with Frag, like the Ultimate Gamer Challenge or the FragCon events, where it's just like random challenges that are presented to you, and it's sort of like judging how you are learning a game rote.
Oh my God,
Like,
were you and I the ones talking about the Resident Evil one, the random door mod for Resident Evil? That's
that
apparently a big
sounds
thing.
incredible.
I think
I
it's
would,
specifically Resident Evil 2, I think too, is also the big thing about it, is basically any door can lead to any part of like the station and stuff. It's just
wow,
fucking wild.
that's
Like
really cool.
I don't,
Yeah,
to be clear, whoever I was talking to about it clearly
it
wasn't you.
wasn't me. I'm
We
sorry.
were talking about how it really doesn't work, but like it's a huge first step for those kinds of games to be able to at least get that working on like the coding side of literally opening a door to any other door in the facility. It's just the next step is then like how can we make this also playable, right? And to that point, they can't use the new one because the like specifically it's dependent on the old school Resident Evil door style loading where it cuts to black and you just see a door open, your character walks through, and then room loads. So they can't use the new one because the new one is too smooth, essentially.
Yeah, that's there's a randomizer for Resident Evil 3 Nemesis,
Mhm.
the PlayStation 1 one. And those games, it always seems so strange to me because they're almost like point and click adventures where the items you find along the way are what open up the progress to the world. So, like, to randomize all the items, you also need to open up the world a little bit. So it's an interesting
You can really
game to
screw
play.
yourself by
Yeah.
like not finding the right key in the right place, right?
Yeah.
But I will point out to you, and I love you for this because you do this a lot. But like that is how Zelda works too.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Like that is how games kind of in general work. They just put a different veneer on them. But like if you can wrap your head around a Zelda randomizer in the way that works, like then you could wrap your head around Resident Evil in the grand scheme of things, right? It's just that there has to be, much like they've done with the Lord of the Rings. Oh my God, the Legend of Zelda randomizer that we both have dipped into. There has to be a ton of playtesting and quality assurance to make sure that this is viable and how to make it viable, right? They're like I said, it's very easy, especially in the Resident Evil games, for like the key that you need to be on the other side of the door that is locked by that key, and that fucks you, right? Like
Well, I mean, does that fuck you though, or is that the situation where you don't need to go into that room?
You might not need to go
Yeah.
in that room anymore because the item that you needed, that's it, right?
Yeah.
Like that's why you need to do those playtests, and that's why there need to be limits in place sometimes about what can and can't be randomized, and that's what they're figuring out, right? Like they're in the middle of
Yeah,
figuring
they're in
that
the
out.
early stages, and I understand that, but it's just hard. Like I understand the veneer, and I get that, but like the thing about Zelda is the progress items that you get, they occasionally open up ways to get places on the map, but so much of the map is just open to you from the beginning where you can get to those places to look for items.
Sure, there's a much
to get
more
progress.
open world.
I mean,
Yeah,
what I
there's a
think
much
about is
open
in Nemesis, you need to get that big fucking fire hose in order to kind of open up Raccoon City to you.
Right,
And then
right.
they're just like, oh, okay, so that fire just isn't there. And it's like, so you've kind of taken away the whole, like, I'm not going to go to the train station first now because I don't have to go to the train station first.
It'd be like in the new one, like
Yeah.
you don't need bolt cutters. We've gotten rid of all the chains in the game, and
Yeah,
it's
and
like,
it's
what?
Oh, okay, cool. All the doors in the police station are unlocked. Oh, well, I'm going to go to the places I need to go then. I'm not gonna, but then where it comes down to with a good randomizer to break that out is those places where you used to go before. There's a chance that an item you'll need later on in the game is going to be there.
Right.
So it's all a balancing act. It's all an algorithm to figure out if this is going to be finishable. I mean, I remember when Super Metroid and Link to the Past crossed over, and I legitimately played games that were unfinishable because just the tech wasn't available like it thought it was. And I also remember the Link to the Past randomizer one where they're like, if anyone can finish this seed, let us know.
Well, and that's what leads to specific seeds being competition approved, right?
Yeah.
Like they have straight up like you need to be using this seed for this competition because we know it works, we know the quirks, we know all of this shit, right?
Yeah.
So like seeds become hugely important in that regard. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, and then realizing that like, no, you can get a bomb. There's always a bomb available in Hyrule Castle. It sucks having to go and like up Aghanim's tower in the castle tower with Zelda behind you with three hearts
Right.
and the fighter sword. But like, if you can get high enough, you can get a bomb, and oh, there's your progress. So it's an interesting thing. But regardless, all of those things still qualify me as an esports athlete
Yeah.
because I am competing in it. So I put down, I filled it out, and I'm like, maybe they don't, because they're like looking for esports teams is what it says. But I'm like, I'm an athlete. It says they're looking for esports athletes. Specifically, I'm an esports athlete. I mean, I played hockey when I was younger, but I would get wrecked on a hockey court right now. A hockey court on the rink. I would get wrecked on the rink right now, and I fully know that. So I applied, and they took me in. So now what is going? It starts tonight at 6 p.m., but it kind of started on Friday because
Okay.
they sent me an activity tracker. I have a Fitbit on. It's not a Fitbit. It's a Let's Calm Go band or sports
Nice.
band. It's interesting to have it on. What's really interesting is I never get deep sleep, I've come to find out. So the fact that I wake up rested is kind of crazy to me.
I hate you. Anyway,
Yeah, so I've been wearing that since Friday when it came in. I've started tracking my diet, and beginning tonight at 6 p.m., I'm going to use Neural Tracker X. Are you familiar with Neural Tracker X? Do you know what this program is?
I mean, is it the one that allows for like eye tracking and all that stuff, or what's the
So
deal?
it's used by the U.S. military and by professional athletes in order to increase their reaction time to things, to like keep their wits about them and identify targets and things that are coming around. So like for the military, it's to identify targets and track targets. But then like the way that professional athletes do it, it's so like a basketball player has better situational awareness on the.
You taking drugs, Dev? You taking
No,
you
there's
taking
no
government
drugs.
sanctioned
There's no drugs involved in this. But NeuroTracker X, it is a like established program. They sent out to me like for real red and blue 3D glasses, like in frames. Like they're not
Nice.
just made of paper, and it's actual lenses that are in there. And I'm going to log into this program tonight, and for half an hour, I'm going to be shown spheres. They're going to identify the 4 of like 9 or 10 that will be on screen, and I'll have to track them as they move around and then see if I can identify those 4 spheres again. And then based on if I do well or not, they'll move faster or they'll move slower.
Yeah.
And they're going to do this. I have to do it for 8 days. Every day around 6 p.m. I'm going to be doing this, and they're going to see if I have any sort of improvement, if like the fact that I don't ever get deep sleep, that it's just light sleep, how that affects it. Like it's this really cool thing to be a part of.
Yeah. The tracker stuff is really interesting. They also use it for people with brain damage and stuff like that. Probably not this exact version, because this sounds like this is like a high end one that you probably have to pay a lot of money for.
Yeah, well,
outside
that's
of
the cool
being
thing.
part
They're
of it,
like,
right?
so you get to use it for this, and if you enjoy your time with it, you'll be offered a reduced subscription to the service. And I'm like, cool. Like, it was weird. Like this whole intake interview that I had on Friday about what was doing. I mean, I've been tracking what I eat since like 2014. I think I'm at like 1,500 days in a row on my food tracking app on my phone.
I mean, the analytics are cool.
Yeah.
Are they going to give you the ability to compare them to like somebody like some like Korean StarCraft team or something?
I
Like,
don't know.
what are they,
I don't
like,
know how that's going to happen through.
like the information is good. I don't know. I wouldn't have the knowledge to compare that information to anything, right?
Right.
Like,
Well, that's
and
not
I'm
my
sure
job.
they
My
do,
job is
but-
just to provide them the data
right. But
for
like
them
one
to.
of the right, but like one of the big things about like taking on like research and like doing research on humans is that you have to by law like give them access to your results, and so that they can like yay or nay, like maybe I don't want the government to know I smoke this much weed before I play my video games, like type things, right? Like you have to at some point let the people know that they have the right to ask for that information. And I'm sure at some point in like signing up for this, you probably waived that right, which is the way that a lot of research gets around this shit. But as somebody that did have to conduct human research using video games, like I am very familiar with the human requirements, like the human rights requirements that are involved in all that shit. And so like it's very interesting to me to that moment when you say like, would you like to see your results? Because it's kind of disingenuous. And this is something that I actually talked a lot about with with the people that I was conducting research under, like my mentorship and all that stuff, is like this question seems really unfair because you're asking if they want to see this information, but you're not required to provide any context for that information. So like a lot of people like say like, oh no, yeah, I really want to make sure that I get a good read on this before it gets published, before it gets released. You know, if you're doing a dissertation or stuff or something, somebody may say, I want to read it before you let it, you know, put it out there before you publish it, because like I want to make sure you're not going to put something out there that's going to get me in trouble at some point with somebody. And you can say, sure, I'll give it to you. And then when you do, they read it and they're just like, okay, I actually don't know what any of this means. And it's just like, yeah, I mean, hopefully whatever you're worried about isn't in there, I guess. I don't know what else to tell you, but like, I'm not required to go any deeper than to like give you like yay or nay permissions on this. So I'm just curious what they're offering you in terms of that, because I would love to see my own numbers and that and those kinds of analytics, but also I would need to see somebody else's in order to know if I'm like comparatively where I stand, right?
So they told me in the intake interview that most people, the Neural Tracker X gives you a score at the end of each event where you're tested. The average person is around 1.5 in whatever that score process is.
Okay.
And professional athletes tend to be around 2.0.
Interesting.
That was the number that we were given in that intake interview. I mean, I don't know any further than that. I really don't mind doing it, right? Even if it like looks really bad, whatever it is, it'll just prove to me things that I've already thought about myself. Like there's a reason I don't race Link to the Past randomizer anymore. And
Right.
I prefer more like in-person events where like the human element of it and like how I react to things on the fly are more the challenge, as opposed to something that you can kind of practice and develop skills for. Because I'm not going to be like these people in Link to the Past randomizer who are learning tricks like Diver Down. Because Diver Down just, it's not something that was there when I started. It's new tech, and I don't know how to do it. I'm not comfortable doing it. But somebody who plays the game like 2-3 seeds every day and is doing it 2-3 times a day, they're going to beat me every day of the week. The only way I could win that is just like by where I excel, which is checking, like knowing where to check and knowing where there is like a dearth of value to be found.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the big things that's really important about this kind of work is establishing value for
Yeah.
like for this sort of stuff in the world, because like it's very easy for people to talk about how athletes get paid too much money and talk about how esports is a whole other bizarre level of that to them, because like then these people aren't even like physically doing something, so why do they get this kind of money? Like that conversation irks me, because I do know the kind of work that people put in, even at the intramural level, like that you are at, right? Like that that idea that the effort, time, patience, love, like everything that people put into their jobs is what athletes, is what players put into their sport, their game. And so like to talk about like inherent value and how do you measure it, and it's just there's all of these weird kind of vague conversations about this stuff. This starts to put some actual analytical data to all of it. And so I love that this kind of stuff exists, but like fuck me if it's going to mean anything in the short term. It's probably just going to be something that leads to better research down the line, but that's always good too.
Well, I mean, yeah, exactly. And I think they're doing it specifically just for their team. Because Texas A&M has a team. I don't know what the reasoning behind it is. I mean, it's a fair thing to judge, right, as we go forward and
Well, if
esports
it's
become a thing. But if they're trying to determine like what other esports athletes are eating or what their sleep schedules are, and then what the output is in order to like determine a regimen for their own specific collegiate athletes,
right.
like that would make sense to me.
Well, it's part of the justification of athletic like sides to all types of schooling, right?
Yeah.
Because when like because it we I'm not going to sit here and say that the reason that every school has a football team is so they can study them. But what it does is all of those complaints that you rightfully hear about, like why does half of my tuition seem to go to a sports team, right? The way that they're starting to kind of justify that sort of stuff is exactly this kind of research. And esports has more than any other athletic, like college level athleticism had to really prove itself as to its worth in existing, right? There's an esports team out here too, at the the University of Utah, and like their whole thing is, in addition to being on the team, like you have to be involved in certain programs. And I imagine it's a lot of this is to justify this thing. We want to make sure that we're getting research out of it. We want to make sure that we're producing papers and dissertations and theses out of it. Like so you're helping them also kind of just like justify their own existence. So it's the kind of research that they're just going to do just because they have to do research, and that can get really dangerous because sometimes people just do lazy research just to keep the money flowing. But it
I don't
sounds
know,
like they're
just some
doing
wavy lines on a card.
exactly, right. But yeah, there's this idea being that like there this is the scholarly side of allowing this kind of athletic stuff to exist at the collegiate level, and that's really cool to see people actually doing something with the sports side of their funding.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm excited to do it. I thought I was too old for it. I didn't think that there'd be any value in it, but apparently they like I'm the cap. Like anyone older than me, they probably don't. They're not interested in. And I think the youngest they're looking at is like 15-year-olds. So like it's a nice 20-year gap that they're looking for. Again,
Brett
I don't
Favre
know.
will still work his way into it somehow.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
I mean, it's the thing. I mean, they're still accepting applicants. So if you do play games, like one of the things is I asked if I could talk about it on the show, and they're like, "Please talk about it on the show. Tell your friends. We're looking for people to participate in this." And you
Cool.
know, I'm getting some compensation for it. I will disclose that. The compensation, it's varied right now. Like there's talk of a potential completion bonus and things like that. And it's a lot of work to get that done. Like there's things I need to do in order to get that. But I am excited to try it. I'm excited to, even if the data that I get is completely unreadable, I will try to put it into something that means something to me. I mean, if my reaction times are less than the average as told to me by the researchers on this study, that's going to mean something to me.
Yeah, well,
Like,
and then you have conversations about like what is talent versus training, right, and
yeah,
all that sort of good stuff. Like, yeah, it'll definitely be good info. It's going to be such early information in this conversation that it's not going to be applicable information.
yeah. I don't know. It's cool. It's just a thing that I'm excited about. And you know, the fact that I have the activity tracker, I've been wearing it the whole episode. I have the things and I've logged into all of the systems. Like I don't think I'm being sold a bill of goods right now. They've asked for no money from me. They've only provided things to me.
Yeah, I mean, like, if it's college research level stuff and they're reaching out over things like Twitter and social media in general, totally a thing that happens nowadays. Has
Yeah.
been happening for years now, but that's probably as legit as it's going to get. I mean, as long as you know for sure that they actually are from this program and this school, then all good on you. But I will say this: it's a dirty word nowadays, but do your research, right? Is if you if you find yourself stumbling across these kinds of offers, make sure you look into them good and hard first before you just start accepting shit and giving people your address.
Exactly. That's true. I mean, I had to give them my social security number, my bank routing stuff. They wanted a sample of blood. All of this is a fake. This is not true at all. This was part of the research that I did to make sure that all they really wanted from me was my name and my address in order to send out a tracker to me.
Yeah.
That's all I needed to provide to them. And like, there's not much you can do with a person's name and address. Maybe if you stock the mailbox and are able to steal a piece of mail, but there's enough to do it where I feel safe enough with it. And within the study, I'm not even referred to as me. I've
Right.
been given a code
Yeah.
set of numbers and letters that represent me. So
Yep.
I mean, it feels like everything. I work in the collegiate world too, and then like they're talking about things like this is how it's going to handle. There's going to be a bit of a delay and things like that, and I'm just like, oh, all of this tracks with the stuff that I already do.
Yeah, if they ever talk
Working
about
on a college
IRB or
campus.
HSRB, like regulations and like, hey,
Yeah.
we have this paperwork we need you to sign because it is required by this governing body at our school, like that, those are all good signs that
Yeah.
they're doing things right. So that's good stuff.
Yeah, so it's exciting. I'm excited to. I'll be almost done with the study next week. So this is essentially the before episode
Nice.
And then next week we'll have the after, and I can share
Ooh.
a little bit of what's been going on. But I'm excited. It's exciting to do something like this, especially since I've been out of gaming, because like I liked to go to in-person events, and those have sort of faded away.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, with everything that's happened, slash
Yeah.
also people have just really started to suck over the last 5 years. Yeah, no. Speaking of kind of falling out of gaming and not knowing how I'm feeling about things, I know was kind of bleak about my new OLED the other day because of some issues that I was having with playing Mario Rabbids. So the issues have cleared up, and you want to know what I did in order to kind of really just see if I had to try it, and sure enough, it seems to have worked.
What'd you do, Siege? I'm
I blew on
scared.
the cart, man.
You son of a bitch! I knew that's what you were gonna
I
say.
blew. I literally just like I took a Kleenex first and kind of wiped the cart down to just make sure it wasn't a fingerprint issue. But then I legitimately just gave it a good old fashioned blow, blew in the little cart slot. I'm just trying to think of a way to say this that didn't sound gross. Slot on the Switch itself, right? Like just gave it that the old college blow. And then inserted the cart again and haven't had a problem since. Like I was getting some really weird like loading in of assets in the wrong place and stuff like I was having some real problems. So I was just like, oh, God, I really don't know what I'm gonna do about this. I have to try another game. But I was like, before I get deep into another game and really piss myself off, what if this works? And sure enough, it seems to have. So there you
At
go.
this point, I would like to point out, don't blow on your electronics equipment. It's not magic. Sometimes your saliva or the breath can cause damage to the electronic stuff. I'm glad that it worked in Sejohn's case, but first resort or last resort, blowing into it.
I'd really have to work up a mouthful of spit to blow into my cart in the 2 seconds that I did it. Enough saliva to fuck it up.
Well, I know that, but like that's the thing. Like blowing on Nintendo carts, one of the reasons that we think that it worked, we think the world thinks that it worked, is because it added like a thin layer of moisture to the contacts that actually helped with the contact.
That was never why I thought I was
That's
doing
not.
it. It was more about getting dust out of it.
It was about getting dust, and I understand that. But the research that they've done now, especially when you see that like corrosion is a big thing with the carts, and it's not that people were taking a sip of water and then blowing in there, right? It's just the fact that when you blow out of your mouth a small amount of saliva and particulates do come out every time that you blow.
You're moving air faster, which means that like you're causing oxidation to happen at a higher rate. Like, there's definitely little reasons why all of this stuff doesn't work. But I'll tell you this, it fucking worked.
Well, I'm glad that it worked for you, but I just want to make sure that people don't. I don't want it to become the snake oil miracle cure
don't
for
start
issues.
making out with your Don't start making out with your Switch just yet. Like go out and buy yourself a can of condensed air.
That's a good thing to start.
Like if you really want to do this right, like don't do as I say, not as I do.
A little bit of rubbing alcohol on a Q-tip is a good way to clean any contacts in these situations.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about the inside of the Switch, but definitely on the carts. If something got on them or something there, any of those little contacts, just a little bit of rubbing alcohol does wonders. Make sure you let it dry before you start it, or you could short and destroy the tiny microchip that's in there. I'm glad that it worked out for you, though. I'm mad at my Nintendo Switch right now, which is why I'm happy that I finished Blossom Tail, The Sleeping King. The boomerang is really sort of broken in that game. That's all I'm going to say about it. Oh my god. The final boss stands in one location for like a long attack, and you're not supposed to be able to get him because he's protected by like a laser grid, and the boomerang is not stopped by the laser grid, and you can just throw it and it will stay on him, and every frame that they're in contact, it does damage. So nice. I beat that boss very easily. The hardest boss in Blossom Tales, the Sleeping King, is that Fire Mage fight that we talked about. Like every other fight, because you get the boomerang from that fight, pretty much what I did was just use that. Also, there's a Fireball spell, which is a better aimed, more powerful bomb. Because, I don't know. The game is good. I'm really enjoying it. But Blossom Tale 2, the Minotaur King, Minotaur Prince, I'm sorry, is fantastic so far. Sejohn had mentioned that when he plays Blossom Tail, he feels floaty as the character of Lily. That is not the case. It is a much tighter control scheme,
Good.
and it feels more influenced by Link to the Past in terms of the fact that right now I'm trying to collect the key to the Minotaur's Labyrinth, but that seems like it's going to allow me to pull a Master Sword and then be able to continue. Now, I don't know if that means that'll be the end of the game or if it will open up a larger part of the game, but I'm getting more Link to the Past vibes from it.
I mean, that's rad because we already felt that with the first one. So to hear that there's even more of that in the sequel is cool.
Well, it's great because it is not a direct sequel, too. They totally went the Zelda route, and it's like she's named after the original hero from the time of the Sleeping King.
Nice.
And it's just, I mean, the whole thing is that it's a story. It's a story that a grandfather is telling to his two grandchildren.
Right.
So they get to have like fun like that. But the fact that from the start they're like, you're not the same character, and then even so, like the first boss that you fight is the ghost of the Sleeping King from the first game. Like it feels more Zelda than a lot of the Zelda that I've been playing in the modern era.
Nice.
And I've enjoyed it a lot. Which is good, though, because Sejohn, he's a fucking asshole. I love him. I love Sejohn. I wouldn't do a podcast with him if I didn't love him. But he's gotten me into Mario Kart 8 again recently.
Nice.
And for the first time ever, I am experiencing stick drift. And I am not loving that at all.
Yeah, I actually, so with the new OLED, got a couple of two new Joy-Cons, right, that came with it, and we have the other Switch in the house, and we've gotten back to doing some Stardew family farming since I got the OLED, now that we each have our own system, right? We have a light and two Switches in the house, so we can each just be in our own room doing our own thing, but playing Stardew. So the one of us that's on the main Switch was using some old Joy-Cons, and the drift was just getting so bad that they were like making I don't know if anybody ever heard, but I accidentally in my old Stardew game accidentally had a kid because of Joy-Con drift. Like it drifted to the accept option instead of no option for having a child, and like ended up with a baby. Like it was the weirdest experience in gaming I'd had in a long time. So they were experiencing a lot of that sort of stuff, right? And I was like, well, I'm playing with my Pro controller like on my OLED downstairs. So like if you want to take my new Joy-Cons and just play with those for a bit, like as long as we make sure we are very delicate with them and try and make them last as long as possible, I don't mind if you borrow them for this. And they were like, this is like playing a whole new, it was like playing a whole new video game to them, because like things like fishing and the ways in which they have to like move around and farm and like all of this shit that was like, they didn't realize how much compensating they had been doing for Joy-Con drift, and it was just like mind-blowing to them on a new set of Joy-Cons. Like it was wild.
Yeah, it is. So I really want to unlock Golden Mario. That's what I want to do in Mario Kart 8, because I stopped before I could do it before.
Okay.
And by all accounts, all you have to do is get gold in all of the 200cc races.
Yeah, I think the time trial ones will unlock like golden vehicle options, but the Golden Mario is hidden behind the CC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So first of all, I looked into it and I'm like, what is the best type of character to do this with? And
I think you do need to get a star, to be clear. You can't just come in first, which I think is impossible. I think you get a star. I'm
fairly certain you do. By all accounts, it's just you need to win every cup. That's what everywhere says online. So I've just been doing them. And 200cc was like too fast for me before. I'm like, I'm not really comfortable doing this. But then like I figured out the way that people compensate for that is if you use a slow character, then you're fine.
Right.
If you use a character whose speed is like in the 2 tier, you're not going to be as bothered by that. So I've been racing with Shy Guy and having just a real blast, and I've been winning stuff, but then starting up, and here's the worst part about this drift, it's on my Pro controller. All you hear about is Joy-Con drift. This is on my actual Pro controller that I have owned for 5 years. And
my Pro is the only one is one of the only original controllers I have that don't have any drift yet. Ugh.
Yeah, so it's and it's really disappointing because I noticed I think it was like Dragon Driftway is the name of the course, that like there's so many straightaways in that, and I would just like take it off the my stick off a little bit to rest my thumb, and I would start drifting to the left, and I'm like, no, that can't be the fact. And then I tried to like switch to the D-pad, and it still was happening, and it's disappointing because I have another controller. I have the one that I bought specifically for the new Mario Party because I'm like, this is a $20 controller. If it breaks, it breaks.
Right.
If she dies, he dies.
There's an online mode to that, isn't there?
Yeah, we should play that.
Why? Yeah, why?
I don't know why we haven't at this point. We'll talk about it. We'll figure it out. I think for a reason it was you didn't have the game. That was a hold up, and then other stuff just came out.
Yeah, well, we'll need to remedy.
Yeah,
that
we'll remedy it. Don't worry.
I love that Superstar.
We could have some
to
fun
those old
with
boards
it.
and stuff.
Ooh, yeah, it'll be something to talk about once we do it. But yeah, so that controller is what I've taken to because I really just want to do it. I'm like really feeling Mario Kart, but it's so the Pro controller. This is what I want to say. Is such a great controller. It really is, to the fact where it's like noticeable that I'm using this like crappy little PDP controller that like, no offense to PDP, they did a pretty good job with it, but the paddles aren't as long, right? And they're a little bit thicker, and maybe that's good for like overall hand health, but the Pro controller, it just fits right in there, and I feel comfortable playing it. And the fact that like I got stick drift and it's on my Pro controller, like sometimes it sucks to be unique, right? Like, oh, my Joy-Cons are fine, but my Pro controller, yeah, that's a piece of shit right now.
Yeah.
Hopefully with the Splatoon 3, I can get, I think they did a Splatoon 3 Pro controller, so that'll have like all of the updated stuff that's in it.
Ooh.
Like with the deeper D-pad cut and everything. So
I was actually looking at Splatoon 3 thinking this might be me jumping on the Splatoon train. I feel like Splatoon is slowly becoming like the Pokemon series for me, where like I see so many people around me enjoying it that I always kind of think maybe I would too, but then I just don't get in on the zeitgeist when it first comes out, and it seems lost to me at some point. So maybe Splatoon 3 will be the one that I jump in on. I am very curious about that world. I just have never really dove into it.
Here's why I will never play Splatoon, and it's not a negative thing. It's just one of those moments where I realized, oh, this is not a world for me. I went to visit a friend from high school. We had run into each other because he was attending the school that I was working at the time, and he had invited me over to come hang out and play games. And I'm like, you guys have 2 Wii U's? And he's like, oh yeah, Splatoon, we both love it so much that we had to buy another one so that we could play Splatoon together. And that was the moment where I'm just like, I'm never playing Splatoon. That's like, that feels like a level of commitment that is scary to me, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, like, it is the closest that I think Nintendo has ever truly gotten to the online, like, Apex or Call of Duty style, like, model. And in that, like, needing to have your own device set up and good to go, like, is very, very much part of that world. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I laugh because like that I had that same experience, but it was with Stardew Valley. But yeah, but Splatoon is, I mean, by all accounts, fantastic series, clearly beloved. It has made itself a Nintendo like franchise, like right, like it is just one of them now. And that excites me. Like that's really cool. I've never had the group to get into it, right? Like I've always had enough people around me to be interested, but not the right people for me to like push me over the edge. And so I don't know. Maybe we'll see what happens with Splatoon 3. I don't know.
I know that I won't though, because it's just one of those things where I've done the test fires and it's enjoyable enough, but those type of games, they don't tend to grab me the way that like I would want them to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I mean it hasn't grabbed me either, right? I'm right there with you, man.
Super Mario 35 was the only battle royale that really did it for me, and if I could just have one more day with it, Sejohn. I didn't realize. I mean, I realized they said that it was going away, but I thought that was like a lie. I really can't believe that Nintendo was like Super Mario 35, and I really enjoyed it, but I like watching the videos from like the week after Super Mario 35 released, and people talking about how it has no longevity, so they understand why Nintendo is only doing it for a short amount of time. And then I'm like, man, if you only knew what we were able to do with that game before it went away.
Yeah. Has done a lot of experimenting with the online gaming stuff over the last few years. I have to give them credit for that. As usual, it is like 10 years behind everybody else, but they have been making a concerted effort. And from that, we have seen better online connectivity, better online experiences and games available to us. Like a lot of good stuff has slowly started to come out. But I mean, I think we always knew they were going to get there eventually, but as we've always pointed out, it's just so far behind the ball on everybody else that it just feels like they're just playing catch up.
Yeah, I can't disagree. Oh, sorry. I went into a sad place thinking about Nintendo and Super Mario 35. It's weird times. I think that's it for me. Oh, I want to, since this is the before episode, I'd like to reiterate what happened with Disney Plus that kept me from watching She-Hulk, and the fact that I have now sent that Fire Stick into Amazon because it was still under warranty before I decided to spend money on another one or to look into something else. Mm-hmm. But then what we used to watch She-Hulk, what ended up saving the day, was Dale brought her Xbox Series X upstairs. Nice. And it was awesome, like, because it definitely 4K, not like a questionable, maybe it will be 4K, maybe it won't be 4K this time.
Excellent.
So yesterday morning when I woke up and saw that Xbox Series X's were in stock at the Best Buy, we have a third one that is now dedicated to that TV, specifically just to stream stuff.
Just to watch She-Hulk.
No, not just to watch She-Hulk. We watched Top Gun on it,
nice.
Which was excellent, and we upgraded our soundbar too. We said that we would do that for Top Gun, so now we got like an actual Atmos soundbar, and it sounded really nice.
Good.
It was a good time, but I'm still gonna wait and see what happens with that Fire Stick. But by all accounts, which is why I was like, I think I'm gonna move on to something else. I don't think I'm going to wait for this to come back. It's just like a known issue that occasionally Disney Plus just stops working with the Amazon Fire Stick.
I will point out that, again, it's not just a Disney Plus issue. This is something that even at Netflix we were consistently dealing with. And it is that that weird HDMI copyright, like you might be pirating shit, like DRM nonsense. That was an issue. Like, there's something about the Fire Stick and the ways in which it emulates like those applications that sometimes something in the code sets off that DRM shutdown. It's fucking wild. Like,
and you know, if that was what we were getting as the problem, I think it would be different for me. But I tested the stick on a different monitor, right? On a different television too. And I got the same error message. And that error message is not for a DRM. It's a compatibility issue. And by that, they're like, oh, so the Fire Stick has been updated and now your program doesn't work with it. And I'm like, well, that sucks that they did that, especially when you consider that Amazon does sell their own subscriptions to these channels. So could they be trying to drive me towards that? Again, That's just conjecture. I have no proof of that, but it's where my mind drifts to, right?
I mean, on the consumer end, right?
Yeah.
You can't help but start to buy into some of that, like, that conspiracy theory level bullshit, because it happens in such a way that it sure does feel that way, right? Like it doesn't matter what is actually happening. The experience feels like this. Like, it feels like it's a cash, like, push in some fashion to get you onto other things, or to just, like, oh, just buy it from us. Don't bother watching it on the streaming service you're already paying for. Just buy it from us. The ways in which that Amazon started, like, burying, like, certain things that were available on Prime behind, like, purchase it first was like a big thing a while back, and they've since stopped that. But now what they've done is they've muddied the waters in other ways. Is like they purposefully make it difficult to figure out what the fuck is going on that service, to the point where sometimes you realize it's better to just buy the damn thing. And I'm not gonna lie, I have fallen into that trap sometimes, where I'm just like, I just want to own it anyway. It's becoming a nightmare to figure out if I'm going to have to watch this with commercials or not. I might as well just purchase the digital version of it and then just have it in my library. And then they've gotten more money from me in that way.
Yeah. So that's where the thought process is. And even the whole, this is still under warranty before I buy another one, can I see what it is? That whole process is crazy, where they're like, just send us the Fire Stick, don't send anything else with it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, okay. So I just dropped it in an envelope and dropped it off at the UPS store. Like, this feels right.
Oh,
It
the weirder
doesn't.
thing is, I don't know if you've got it out about you. You must, but Kohl's has teamed up with
Yep.
Amazon. So like and that is out here, the closest three places to return anything to Amazon are the three different Kohl's in the different towns around me. Outside of that, there's you can go like to the other side of the city to a UPS store if you want, or you can just go to the Kohl's 10 minutes away. But do you know how awkward that feels, like walking in to a Kohl's with stuff I did not buy from them and like handing it to them and just trusting that they're gonna do the right thing with it, especially if it's like a $200 piece of like kitchen equipment that we did have to return one time. I'm just like, man, I really hope you guys are not gonna fuck this up in some way, because what does it matter to them if this actually works or not? This
We
process
double
works.
purchased a bunch of gifts for Dale. Like I didn't. Me and my mother bought the same things for Dale for Christmas, and then we gave them to her. And then it's like, well, we're gonna return the other ones, right? Like we don't need two of these.
Hmm.
So walking into Kohl's with like 6 Playmobil sets was the weirdest feeling ever.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the Amazon drop off is at like the back of the
Yeah,
store,
the way that they do it. Yeah. So you
so that you, and it makes sense. It's so that you might impulse buy at Kohl's, where like I feel like no one impulse buys at Kohl's, right? Like I don't. That's like a destination shopping in my eyes.
Oh, for sure. To the point where I think it's probably the reason they won't exist in the next 5 or 6 years. I mean, the move to allowing Amazon returns at Kohl's was like one of their many last ditch efforts to keep their doors open during like COVID.
Yeah.
Like they're just like, we'll even let you bring other people's shit here, please. Just please come to Kohl's.
Yeah, I mean that started in 2019. I do know that, so it was pre-COVID, but I guess maybe it was a test market thing. I don't think I can return to Kohl's here anymore because they have there are
Oh,
Whole
it's still a big
Foods.
thing.
Are there Whole Foods around you?
Oh, you can also do Whole Foods.
Yeah,
That
okay.
is also part of the whole deal. The Whole Foods thing is really bizarre to me, because the Whole Foods out here is trying, or at least the one that I've been to the most, is also moving towards the staffless model. Like, you know,
Those are
this whole thing.
crazy. Those things
Yeah,
are
they're
nuts.
nowhere near it. I don't want somebody to think that they're going to show up at the Kohl's or the Whole Foods near me and it's going to be full of robots. That, like, they're not there yet, but a lot of like the mentality towards like, we're only going to start stocking a small variety of these particular things because that helps in keeping kind of the shit straight. That way, when somebody orders a particular, say, type of like flour, they don't get like the wrong type, and they needed that particular type because, say, of certain gluten allergies that they need to be watching. Like, that is something that they still need to work out. Is that those robots can't seem to figure out that
Flour is
subbing
not
in,
just flour.
well, right, like
Yeah.
subbing in different things is not always the best option. Like, there needs to be limits on what it will and won't sub in and stuff. Like, it's really fucking weird.
I mean,
So anyway,
to be
they
fair, Instacart has that same problem, and that's all humans.
well,
So,
right, yeah, right. So it kind of looks like it might be an unsolvable problem, but that's not me. That's not for me to figure out. Right. But somebody out there is going to crack that code someday. But yeah, like there is. So there's definitely the Whole Foods that you can bring your stuff to, but that's one store that is, again, that's one of those ones that's kind of down on the other side of town. So like, it's not the easiest place for us to get to all the time.
yeah.
Whereas there are between here and there, like I said, like 3 or 4 different Kohl's I could go to. No, they still let you do that shit out here, and it really felt like it kicked off a lot during COVID in a way for them to keep their doors open. But 2019 makes sense for them to be starting that too.
It was just one of those things where I'm like, oh, I can just go to Kohl's. It's excellent, especially since you don't like need to box it up. You just show your app
Yeah,
and
you,
go.
yeah,
Like it's really
And
convenient.
then,
But,
just pray that person working that center that has nothing to do with the person you bought this product from cares enough to do this right to send it back to them.
but then I do like I have a really big mug that I drink my water out of. It's 50 ounces. It's for specifically, I bought it for the show so that I wouldn't have to keep going and getting water. It's also why a couple of the episodes get cut short because I haven't thought about the fact that I've put 50 ounces of water into me. In like an hour and a half.
Get those steps in for that Fitbit.
But when it came in, it was damaged, like it was like dented like really badly. And they're like, "Oh, there's nothing you can do because it's a water product." And I'm like, "No, there's something I can do, right? Because I wouldn't have bought this in a store this way. It looks like it happened during shipping." So Amazon said, as a one-time courtesy to you, we're gonna send you out a replacement, and you can just dispose of the other one. And then 2 months later, I got the note from them saying that they charged me for the replacement because they never received the original one back.
Yep,
And I
has
was
happened to
not
me.
happy about that at
Yeah.
all.
Yep.
I talked to customer care. I got it dealt with, but I'm just like, no, 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 no. You're not gonna screw over Devon Decker.
I had that happen to me when they sent me two of a product that they were only supposed to send me one, and that's not my problem.
Yeah,
Like legitimately, there are laws in place that say that that's not my problem. Like I ended up returning one out of the kindness of my heart, but you know what they did is after I returned it, that was when I got charged, and I was like, wait a minute. Not only was I not responsible for ordering two, but on top of that, I also returned one to you.
I also was good and said extra product that I did not order. Right? They even have it. It happens so much at Amazon that one of the top 6 return reasons is extra order received in error.
Well, and I don't know how much there is like truth to this. So like don't this is not God honest truth, but when I worked for Amazon, it was pretty much understood by the delivery drivers that like if somebody received a product that was under $50, Amazon basically was not going to was they not that they weren't going to care, but they weren't going to go after the customer for that, right? So there's a lot of stuff as a delivery driver that you deal with where people will come and ask you questions about the service, and you're not necessarily the best person for it, especially because if you're in the certain situations, you might not even work directly for Amazon, but like right, like there's a whole bunch of shit there. But you know, it was basically understood that if a customer comes at you with a package and is like, "Can you take this for me because of this?" If it was a larger product, you actually had the ability to do that. It did mean that you had to return to the drop off. So not everybody would be happy about that because most of those guys pick up their packages, deliver them, and then once they're done delivering, they go home. They don't have to go back to the Amazon place to check out or check in. Like once their packages are delivered, they're done for the day. But being handed a package to bring back to the delivery place sucked, right? But that was why they were told if it's an under $50 product, just assure the customer to just reach out to and find out if it had to be returned, because there was a good chance it didn't have to be, right? And that's generally where a lot of that stuff would fall. It was part of the other reason why I was so pissed, because the curtains were like $30 and I was like, really? This is an under $50 product and you're going to make me go through all of this bullshit.
That's the way the news goes, unfortunately, sometimes with Amazon. They just it's like it is all run by robots at this point. And they sometimes they're like, "Oh, we sent him out this thing and never got money for it. Let's charge him for it 2 months later."
Yeah.
Cuz it's like, "Okay, what?" Like who knows? All right. I think we've hit that point, right? I've complained about the Fire Stick. I will let you know if once it comes back after the warranty situation, it's functional now and it can do the things that it couldn't do before.
I'm wondering if they're just going to send you just a straight up new one.
I would love if they sent me a straight up new one. That's the thing. I mean, I do feel like there might have been some hardware issue because, like, I went the crazy route of just resetting to factory defaults, and then after doing that, like, it wouldn't download things.
I love that you consider that like a crazy step. When I was on a Fire Stick, because we used to do a lot of Amazon type products in the house, I was factory resetting Fire Sticks on a regular basis because of problems that they were having. Like that was just a common like fix for those for a while.
They've been a part of the ecosystem in our house since 2018, possibly 2017. Jesus. Now that I'm like thinking about it, and I've never had to do one before. I think
I'm probably in the earliest episodes of these of this
show.
You
talked about it.
I would talk about having Fire Sticks and the dots, right? Because we had somebody that, you know, one of the girls was working for a guy that was what he would give out for Christmas every year, was everybody that worked for him would get like Amazon Echoes or Amazon Echo Dots and stuff, and they worked with him for 2 or 3 years each. So we had 5 or 6 of those things like rolling around here. So of course we also had Fire Sticks to compare to map up with them, and we had an Amazon ecosystem in the house. And yeah, like all of that stuff, I was consistently doing factory resets on all of that stuff to fix it because of various things that would happen. So like it's part of the reason we got out of that was I got sick of having to fix stuff all the time.
Yeah, and that's sort of where I'm at, where I went with, let's go with the Xbox. That's updated every time I turn on my Xbox One. It's like there's an update. So I'm like, maybe I'll try it. Maybe I'll see how this works. Everything I want to use is there, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It's the closest thing is having just a Microsoft PC just attached to your TV.
Yeah.
And we know how to fuck with those, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I've looked at other mini PCs for it, but then everything's like, don't you really use it for streaming? It's not very good for that. And I'm like,
no, I mean, the Xbox is a phenomenal solution to that. It's like back in the day when people used to recommend getting a PS3 instead of a Blu-ray player, is because you get the Blu-ray player, but then you get the guarantee of a good quality byproduct of it also being PlayStation.
And
Yeah,
that's another thing is now the Blu-ray player is moved, and I have a 4K Blu-ray player now
there you
attached
go.
to that TV. And my favorite thing is my father being like, I don't know, I got to use a controller, and I'm like, use the Wii for years. Wii was how you watch Netflix for literal years. Don't act like you don't know how to use a controller. And he's taken right to it. He's been watching his YouTube with his controller. And what is really funny is he'll be watching YouTube holding the controller, and it's just like, you can put it down.
Well, the crazier thing, if you really want to look into it, like, is how many things nowadays work with the Xbox and the PlayStation, just normal controllers. My TV controller for my Vizio television that my PS Pro is attached to, once I get an app going, I do need to use my PlayStation controller to tell it, like, start this app. But once I do that, I never have to pick up the PlayStation controller again. I can use my phone, I can use the TV remote, I can use all these other products in the house that everybody else knows how to use. So the other thing is that if I start YouTube and then leave the room, like, the fam doesn't have to wait for me to come back to do the next thing because they don't know how to use the PlayStation controller. They can just use the TV remote to move to the next video on YouTube or on Netflix or something. So that's the other crazy thing about using those instead of the Fire Stick, is that, like, the ways in which those systems open themselves up to other parts of the house are just so much nicer.
Yeah. I mean, I did order him, since 8-Bit Dough has partnered with Microsoft, they have an actual remote control,
Yeah.
and we have that coming for him. But it's like, but you also should know how to use the controller in the event that that's what you need to use.
Right.
So we'll see where that goes for that too. But it's been working so far. Like I said, we watched Top Gun, and he was able to wake up this morning and do stuff without any help. So fingers crossed. But yeah, it came down to it, and I'm like, I didn't want to do an Xbox Series S. I still love the Xbox Series S, but it cannot output natively to 4K. Yeah. And it's like, if I have a 70-inch 4K television, I'm going to want to natively output 4K. I don't want it upscaled.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, the last thing I will say is that there's that 4K hardwireable Chromecast that I got with my Stadia controller.
The problem with that is
it's been awesome.
It does not have all of the apps that he is used to. And I know that you can cast to it.
Yeah,
I know that, but
I just use my phone, so I've never met an app I couldn't send to that thing. So
yeah,
I don't know.
And that's too much for me. I don't like casting either. I'll be honest with you, but I feel like it would be difficult for him. I feel like
it's a literal symbol on every screen. You just press the button and instantly that is on your TV. Like every image, every movie, anything that I've got in front of me.
I had some friends who had one, and I did not love the situation there. It didn't work for me. So I'm more comfortable with putting that there. Plus, I can play some Xbox if I get the urging. Well, I think that's it. Anything else that you want to add, Siege?
I for this week, there's been a whole bunch of stuff, but we're already at the 2-hour mark, so I think we're.
Oh my God! I'm sorry. I feel like I had prepared remarks too that I didn't get to, so we'll address them next week. I'm sorry, Sejohn, that we got wherever we did. Yeah,
I had a lot to talk about this week.
It was a good one. All right, so if you're interested in participating in an esports survey, you can find me on Twitter at Devon D. Decker, and I can give you more information about it. Which means you got to give your Twitter name.
Oh, okay. And if there's anything else that you want to talk about as far as the randomization of various games and how fucking bonkers that world has truly gotten, hit me up at Siege versus the World.
There's a Goof Troop randomizer, Sejohn. I don't know how to access it, but once I do, I would love to race you in some randomized Goof Troop.
Yeah, I don't know what randomized Goof Troop could possibly even look like, so I'm excited.
Yeah, so maybe some of that coming more. But until then, William, why don't you Goof Troop us home, my friend? Have a good one, folks.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devon Decker and Sejohn Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.